Hi, welcome to another session of Impact Talks. I'm Martin Karic, Head of Communications here at IDB Invest. Our session today is going to be in English because we have the honor to have with us Janne Sevanto, who is our treasurer for IDB Invest, and we're going to be talking about the first report on sustainable bonds. No? So, Janne, I know you've been not a long time here in the bank, just like me. We have less than a year, but what's the goal of this report on sustainable bonds in general? What are they, and how do they actually move the needle? No,
thank you, Martin, and thank you for inviting me for the Impact Talks today. It's a great question. I want to start sort of what is really the why sustainable bond issuances can move the needle. And if you think of it, the sustainable bonds are really putting a third dimension to fixed income asset management. They are putting impact in the center of the investment decisions alongside with risk and return. And that's the quiet revolution that is happening with sustainable bonds. And if you put that in the context of Latin American sustainable debt markets, we've seen just a tremendous growth in last 2 years. Actually, the volume of issuances have more than doubled, and now we are at around 48 billion in US dollars in Latin America and the Caribbean.
That's a big number. But when we talk about sustainable bonds, and just try to make it simple for everyone to understand, is that we have an impact, purpose on the bond. Like I'm sure everybody has heard about the blue bonds, the green bonds, or the silver bonds, which I think we recently announced. So what's the difference between all of those different kind of bonds, or they're just the same or variations of the same idea?
So we have recently created our sustainable debt framework that defines what type of sustainable bonds we would be issuing. And within our framework, we will have social bonds and green bonds, and then we will have different themes within those social bond categories and green bond categories. What's common with all of this, it really allows us a way to connect the institutional or local institutional investor to our mission, so that when they invest in our bonds, we use the bond proceeds to then create a development impact and invest in Latin America and Caribbean. And then what is great about the report that we launched, this sort of closes the loop by us then reporting back to the investors what actually was the impact of the either social or green bonds that we raised.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the report. For those of you watching us on the other side, you can download the report from our webpage, which is idbinvest.org. You can find it there, and you can follow the link that's going to be shared with you in just a couple of minutes. But tell me a little bit more about the report. And this is the first time we do this, so there's a first time for something different for us.
That's right. So like I said earlier, we created sustainable debt framework recently and have been issuing out of that. And as a part of that framework, we made a commitment to the investors, to the markets, that we will be reporting back to them, like I said, what is the usage of proceeds that we've raised. And this is the first time we are reporting, and we will be reporting on an annual basis what is the use of proceeds of new bonds new green or social bonds that we issued in the market.
The interesting thing on the report when I read it is exactly that you can actually see the investment and the real impact, because there's a highlight of a few cases, so you can actually see how the money had a real impact on people. So, but you mentioned earlier that bonds, these sustainable bonds, are on the rise in Latin America, in the region. So, what are the areas where IDB Invest will be focusing on this?
No, that's fantastic question, and I really need to answer sort of in two ways. I'm going to focus a lot on our own issuance activity, so what we do as an issuer, but I don't want to forget also, almost more importantly, what we also do with our clients. So and I want to start with the sort of client side. IDB Invest is very active in working with and innovating with our clients who wants to also access the market, sustainable debt markets. So that's one big part of what we do. On the treasury side for funding, we of course are active, one of the leading investors in the sustainable bond phase, and we have a sort of two-pronged strategy at the moment where we are issuing in the global markets for sustainable finance. And this is examples of our benchmark sustainability bonds at the benchmark size, for instance, dollar market, 1 billion. But then we also have a strategy to issue in local markets in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we really have that sort of strategy for two key reasons. We want to be able to tap into the local currency markets so that we can on-lend to our clients in local currency. But also, importantly, we want to contribute to the development of sustainable debt markets in the region.
In the region. And which areas do you think we can push the envelope? Are we going to see more social-oriented, more green-oriented? Blue is part of the green, no? But where do you think it's going to be going the needle?
We're going to have a combination of the two. If you look at, for instance, this current report that we launched, and that report sort of the usage of the social and green bonds and their impact that we did last year, 2021. And if you look at that report, you see a combination that we did about 3/4 of the proceeds went to social causes and 1/4 went to green causes. But obviously we follow what is the development impact and what we wanna do in the region. The other part that I think is interesting is the innovation that we are currently doing in the sustainable bond space. And you mentioned we just went to publish the silver bond actually today, and we yesterday published our second blue bond. And those two bonds are examples of a situation where we tailoring a transaction to, on the one hand, to the sort of investor needs and demands on these areas, in this case with Japanese investors, and then linking that investor demand to our core development priorities in the region. So if you look at what we did with the green bond, with the blue bond that we just published, that was our second blue bond, and it promotes the sustainable use of water resources in the region. And if you think of Latin America, we have about 1/4 of the population living in the coastal areas. And with the climate change, of course, the coastal areas that are also the most vulnerable to the effects of the climate change. On the second bond, the silver bond, similar story, but it's on the social side of it. That bond will be funding social projects that increase inclusion of senior citizens in the region. And again, what's the regional context there? Is if it is expected that it is in our region where the population is aging the fastest in the coming decades. So this is a sort of the framework where we are issuing response.
We're getting older, no?
We are getting older.
Yes, as we progress, this is a common thing, and it's getting everywhere. Now, but I hear that you say that it's bringing international fixed income investors into funding our impact investments in the region. What about the local investors? No? What about the local people in Latin America? What's the role that they can play also here in the market?
Great question. And in fact, we have, like I said, we have this sort of a two-folded approach to this. We want to look at the global markets, but we also want to look at the Latin American local markets for the two reasons that I mentioned earlier. And we have a couple of great examples of this. Last year we issued our first social bond in Mexico. And
Yeah.
that was in local markets to local Mexican investors.
Okay.
And it had a gender theme. So supporting female entrepreneurship, gender inclusion. And now we re-entered the Mexican market in September last month with again another other local issuance to local investors, and now with the theme to support small businesses across the value chains that are really driving the economic growth in the country.
In the country, oh, that's great. So, and how this sustainable bonds position IDB Invest in the capital markets?
They essential for us. They really essential for us. It's they key to our funding strategy. Strategy in the both, like I said, global and local markets, and they position us as a leading sustainable issuer, and also investor with impact in Latin America, and someone who walks the talk of doing and reporting the in a very traceable and trackable way on what it does with the proceeds that it raises in the capital.
Yeah, just to make a point then on the how do we measure this? No? Because there is a very specific methodology and framework that we use, no? Which is developed by the bank, which is the, I think, Delta framework. No? And I have one question: how much money did we allocate this year in the report? Bonds?
So this report that we just issued is for our last year's issuances, and last year our funding program was $1.6 billion equivalent, and we issued all of it in either green, social, or sustainability format.
And how is the distribution across the region? Which countries use them more? Where have we been doing? You mentioned Mexico. I think Ecuador was other place we do. Which of that brings you attention on what we're doing? No?
So the great question. So the distribution is really pretty even throughout the region, because it really follows our business. If you think sort of what's the logic of it, we go to the capital markets and we raise funding that we then invest in private sector businesses in Latin America and Caribbean. And it's really sort of, if in 2021, the entire funding we raised was in green, social, or sustainable format, it's really supporting our business across the region.
That's fantastic. So, and this is also a question coming from the people watching in LinkedIn Live. So, what's different with other multilaterals that are doing on this? No? How do we compare with what other multilateral development banks are doing?
That's an interesting question. And I think there's three key differences on our approach to reporting our sort of allocation and sustainable bond issuances. First one is that we integrate all this in one single umbrella. So we have a one report that covers our green bond issuances, our social bond issuances, and our sustainability bond issuances. So everything is in one umbrella in one place. So that's one. Second is we've made a decision that we want to report the actual attributed impact based on the sort of financing provided to the project where we invest, instead of only providing sort of expected impact. That's the second. And the third one is we also decided that we want to engage with independent validation process, both with the sustainable debt framework that we have, so for the framework itself, but also with the reporting that we done under that framework. Yeah. So we have both the framework itself as well as this report and our future reports go through independent validation process. And we wanted to do that to really sort of show that we want to have a best practice check and balances consistently with our framework. And like I said earlier, we also want to be very active with our clients in helping them to access the sustainable debt markets, sometimes first time, like I mentioned. And we want to show to them that we walk in the talk. We're doing the same ourselves that we would require that they would do, or anyone else in the marketplace we would want to see to do the same.
Okay, so and to wrap up, so is there a pricing premium for an investor to participate in the sustainable bond markets, or not? It's just the same price.
Martin, I'm smiling because it's the great question that's been going around in the market for a long time, and there's an increasing amount of research being done on it. Sort of what's really sort of premium or pricing premium, and sort of that aside, I think my much simpler answer to it is we see clearly strong and increasing demand by investors for our green and social bonds. So the demand is just increasing. And when we talk to our investors, and in fact our funding team is roadshowing in Europe at this moment. So when we talk about to investors about our practices, about our sustainable debt framework, about the reporting and measuring of impact that we do, investors like what they see, and they want to join in our sustainability journey.
So as James Scriven, our CEO of IDB Invest, mentioned, we are in a moment in the region when we really need to impact. No, we need to act now. And these kind of initiatives and these kind of bonds, what really is doing is enable us to have the real impact. So I really want to thank you, Janne, for coming with us today. I think we are always on the time, 17 minutes, which is the idea of these talks. And thanks to you there for watching, and we're going to be seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.